Welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Performance and Budget Scrutiny Committee of South Ribble Borough Council. My name is Peter Pillinger. I'm Councillor for Buckshaw and Worden and the new chair of this committee, and trying to get my head round all that's involved. We have committee members in the Civic Centre along with officer support. The meeting is being live streamed via YouTube and will be available on the council's website. We have one committee member who's dialed in as she's not able to get to the Civic Centre. Some housekeeping for those in the Civic Centre. No fire drills are planned. And if the alarm goes off, please leave by the emergency exits at the back of the room and congregate in the car park. Please turn mobile phones off and switch your microphones off when not speaking. For those joining via Microsoft Teams, please remain muted and indicate at the appropriate time when you would like to speak, and we'll make sure that you're able to do that. So let's move on to the agenda. Apologies for absence. Councillor Peat is on Teams and not physically present, which means she can speak but not vote in the committee. Are there any declarations of interest, Hayden?
Yeah, I'd just like to declare I am a member of the Leyland Town Board. So if there's any questions regarding that within that, I'll not take part in those questions.
Thank you. The minutes of the last meeting, which were held on the 9th of September, have been circulated to the committee. Are they correct as you record them? In which case I will sign them. Any matters arising from the minutes are in the recommendations updates, which are in front of you. Just to mention about those, we have items on those recommendations which have yes against accepted and yes against complete. Any items that are yes and yes, I propose we remove from that list, and that will leave us the work for the items for the ongoing work of the committee. Are you happy with that? Thank you. There are, I think, one item which will come up later in our work this evening from that. I think we had. Right, we're moving on to, Councillor Tomlinson, I'm sorry, brain not working fully. Welcome, and Gail, thank you for coming. And you've got extra work on this evening, I understand, Councillor Tomlinson, because our leader is not well. So we will move on to the Salix grant update. And can you explain for us in the paragraph 39 on page 39 on paragraph 16, there is mention of a DNO refund. We're wondering what that is. As a general point, use of acronyms in council documents which are open to the public, I think, should always have the acronym either expanded or explained in some way as a general matter of policy. And that might be something that the council could take up amongst its officers. But what is a DNO? Could you talk us through how much the council has lost as a result of aborting the Civic Centre project, element of the project, and how much officer time has been taken up on that aborted project? Thank you.
Yeah, I have a feeling that some of that is really quite detailed, certainly on officer time. We'd have to go away and have a look at that. I'd be perfectly blunt with you, I've just had to ask what a DNO is because I didn't know, and I agree entirely with your point about the use of acronyms. It's one of those almost defensive mechanisms that we use to keep the public out when we're talking to each other, that we use acronyms, and I couldn't agree more with your statement. As to whether we've made a loss or not, I mean, currently we have had to cover some of the costs from the council's ledger budget, But if and when we sell the units that we've still got, there is every possibility that we won't have made a loss at all on this project, if and when we can sell those units.
We'll come back to that, I think. But the DNO is a
Distribution network
They are distribution network operator.
for people who provide the electricity networks.
sorry, and one of those is
The people who provide electricity to us.
right. Thank you. So that's actually one of the companies that Rob provides. Right. Will.
So same paragraph. It says that due to rising costs and uncertainties, the council decided to cease decarbonisation work plan for the Civic Centre. The impact of the forfeiture is £369,000. Why weren't these rising costs and uncertainties anticipated when we applied for the decarbonisation grants funding?
Well, I think a lot of water passed under the bridge between the application and, so when we applied, I can't remember the exact timeline, but when we applied, it took quite a number of months and a lot happened, in the energy market, inflation at 11% at one stage. So by the time we came to considering whether to put the heat pumps that we'd got, we had actually got the heat pumps, whether we could justify the cost of putting them into the Civic Centre, things had changed an awful lot. We took the decision not to go ahead in I think an open and transparent matter. In fact, it was a full council report in July where we took that decision. And at each stage in any of these long processes, you've got to reassess, look again at where we are and take what you think is the best decision at the time. And that was the decision we thought was best at the time and was agreed by full council.
Will, do you have any subsequent? So Hayden.
Chair, if I could it was back in 2022 when we made the application for the grant, so a full 2 years had gone by.
I think, I was going to ask a question about the decision between 2022 and now, but I think you've already answered. That's already been answered. But as a result of obviously cancelling this and moving on, are we still on track, and how are we going to meet our target for net zero by 2030? Now this has been aborted. Does that put that at risk?
So there's a whole range of measures by which you can reach net zero. Obviously, putting a heat pump in somewhere is a really efficient way of doing that. But just because we can't put a heat pump in here doesn't mean there's not another range of measures we can use. We've got solar panels on the roof. We can improve our insulation. There's a whole range of issues you can use. That target remains absolute. That target, and the former leader, I remember the former leader, councillor, as then Councillor Foster, saying he would rather set a target that is ambitious and drives the council to make change and then maybe fail by 18 months rather than set a target which is longer and easier to meet. So we remain committed to that target. Putting a heat pump in here would have been a way of doing it. But on all these things, all these mitigations and adaptations for climate change, there is always, in the real world, a financial balance to that. So yes, we want to do what we can, but we have to show everywhere that we have taken the financial cost to this council and the residents of South Ribble into consideration.
Just as a follow-up question to that, when we look at page 39, paragraph 17, there's obviously we've still got this unused equipment. What's the financial value as a rough idea of the unused equipment that we've now got in storage?
Okay, so all being well, and of course every piece of equipment is only worth as much as you can sell it for, but all being well, if we are able to sell these on, it should cover the £162,000 that is outstanding in the balance of the works that have been carried out so far.
Just for clarity, so is the plan to sell these on, or is the plan to at any point get them installed?
At the point at which I'm speaking, the plan is to sell them on.
Is there any timelines you've got associated with that?
Nope.
So in the meantime then, they're sat in storage. What's the ongoing cost of storing, maintaining and servicing the equipment?
Yeah, again, I'd have to get that to you. It's being stored in one of our facilities, but of course there's a cost to that. You know, storing something in one of our own facilities, we might not be paying money out, but there's an opportunity cost because we can't rent that space out or use it for something else. So, but we're happy to get the committee out those figures.
No problem. If you could provide that, that'd be great. And then just on the following paragraph 18, I partially answered this, but what is the timeline for the disposal strategy being presented to Cabinet, and what options are available in disposing of the unused equipment?
I mean, the options, we probably need to market them a bit better. We did, to be honest, we almost sold them last month, but then that deal didn't materialise, although it came very close. How confident am I that we can dispose of these? I'm reasonably confident. They are sought after. It's finding the right customer and getting the best bang for buck that we can for our residents. There isn't a timeline to do that, but it is our wish to dispose of them.
Yeah, there's mention made of hoping to recover most, if not all, of the costs associated with the cancelled work. How confident are you of this, and when will we know?
Well, as I said, I mean, there is an expectation rather than a hope, I think, but that's, semantics. But as I said before, these things are they're only worth what you can sell them for. So it's like having a car sat on your drive that you want to sell and it's valued at 5,000. If you can get 5,000 for it, all well and good. But until we sell them, we won't know for certain what we can get for them. But as I said, the expectation is it should cover the £162,000 that we'd had to use out of other budgets to complete the works that we've already done. It would be wrong of me to give you any certainty on that because it's an item that's for sale and we'll only get what people are prepared to pay for it.
So is there a point where you're prepared to cut your losses?
In theory, yeah. I think when people in the Labour Party want to criticise me, they call me a pragmatist rather than an idealist. And that's because I believe in the real world and getting what you can, getting done what you can, rather than sticking to your guns to try and achieve something that's impossible. So if we can get near to that figure, I would be, as the finance and assets portfolio holder, I would be happy to recommend a sale that gets us anywhere near that.
Just to follow on, I keep hearing words hoped for, reasonable expectation. That do we actually have a valuation of what this equipment is worth?
Yeah, I don't have it with me, but it covers that figure. It covers that figure. But I think, hope for an expectation. I only want to bring things to this committee that are reasonable and that I can defend. I can't come here today and say, I know we will get £162,000 for these heat pumps, because I don't know. The expectation is we can and we will. And so a report that I'm defending will always say, the expectation is we hope that, because that's the truth.
Thanks, Chairman. Good evening. Could I just ask you about what lessons we can actually learn from the way in which the project has been managed? There's always lessons that can be learned from any project. So what would be the ones that we can learn from this one? And as part of that, what more could members do and what more could officers do on similar projects in the future?
I think this has been a big project, and when it doesn't go right, you're absolutely correct. You have to learn things. I think so. My reflections at the moment, and this won't be complete until we get rid of these dispose of these units for the best that we can get. But I think just reflecting out loud, I think one of the things is about different parts of the council speaking to each other. better and not working in silos. I mean, the grant was hugely attractive, a big chunk of money to help us achieve what we wanted to achieve. And yet, I think the conversation between the drive to promote climate change and actually understanding the assets that we've got. So these heat pumps, brilliant, for the climate and for our net zero aspirations, brilliant. Let's get them. So we put a bid in. They were funded by a government agency, and then perhaps not realising exactly how much work we would have to do to our own assets to marry them up to something that was given to us. So I think it's, if somebody says, we can give you heat pumps, great, and that's exactly what we want, and why would we not apply for that grant? And then actually realising the extent of the work that needs to be done to an ageing and out-of-date asset. We've all known, as long as I've been on this council, we've all known that our leisure centres were one catastrophe away from closing down because they had ageing heating system, ageing boilers that were difficult to maintain. And if one of them at any time had gone beyond being able to repaired, that swimming pool would have closed. And we've known that for years, and we've hoped, and you and I, Michael, have been here long enough, we were going to build a new leisure centre because it was going to be so expensive to keep 3 going. This way we will be able to keep those 3 now are future-proofed as far as the boilers, well, we will be when they get connected up to the network, which has been another saga. But I think, I'm sorry, I'm waffling a little bit, but I think, what do we learn? I would say now, if someone came into my office and said, we can apply for a grant and it's great and we can do this, my first question would be, have you talked to the people who it's actually going to affect? And I'm not convinced that happened. Yeah.
Just the other point to add is some of the conditions around the funding. So the public sector decarbonisation scheme at the time had 1 year to spend the funding, which was quite difficult. Lots of councils have had difficulty in terms of the Salix grant as well. The next round, which has recently been announced, actually has 3 years to spend the funding. So I would add to the question, what can officers and members learn, but actually the funders as well. That 1 year timescale was actually really difficult for people to spend. So they have changed that to 3 years now. Thank you.
Councillor King.
Sorry, just a quick one. Are we able to receive the cost of how much it would be to actually go and install the pumps? Would you be able to provide that to the committee? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll send the table out. There was a table in the July council meeting, and so we're happy to recirculate that.
Hayden.
Yeah, one last question, not really directed to Salix and the numbers itself. We sort of go back to the beginning of the report somewhat. It talks about, let's have a quick look. Paragraph 14, it says electricity north west of stated they want to commence their works in December 2024 with connection slightly later. Closing the leisure centres while connection takes place. January is key to recruiting new members, and traditionally when people turn over a new leaf, and obviously I know I need to, should just shutting a centre down at such a peak time be prejudicial to expected income coming in? And I know it's not an ideal time to do this, but can we ensure we have other centres running as alternatives, because it's not a good time to do this?
So there's no ideal time to close any of our leisure centres, but I think we're a hostage to fortune on this. We can't tell people when, the providers, when to hook us up to the network. We are in their hands, but I can assure members that this will be done one leisure centre at a time. So if, when Leyland has to close, and it will have to close for a period of time, people who have got gym memberships who want to use pools will still be able to use Penwitham and Bamber Bridge, and we'll work it through one at a time. So there will always be 2 leisure centres open for the residents of South Ribble.
Thank you. think we've finished on that section, in which case the officer supporting will need to change. Am I right? Oh, sorry. Oh, no, my apologies. Are there any questions from members who are not on the committee? Or from members of the public? So thank you to both of you for coming and attending and providing the information and for the promises of further information that you've made. Do we have some recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. Some of the themes from this evening that the committee might like to recommend. The committee thanks the Cabinet Member and Director for attending and answering the questions. The committee asks that future Council reports use plain English and avoid the use of acronyms. The committee is grateful for the offer of the costs of storage and maintenance of the unused equipment being provided, that the cost to install the pumps also be provided, and that the timescales for presenting the disposal strategy to Cabinet be provided to the committee. The committee welcomes the Cabinet members' acknowledgement of what lessons can be learned for the future from this particular project. Thank you, Chair.
Are the committee members happy with those? I'm seeing nods. Let's just raise your hands for a moment. Thank you very much. We will move on. I see we've already changed officers. Welcome to you, Holly. I didn't ask either of you to introduce yourselves at the beginning of the previous item of business, but perhaps Matthew and Holly, you'd like to introduce yourselves for the sake of members of the public.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Matthew Tomlinson. I'm the Council's Cabinet Member for Finance, Assets and Commercialisation.
Holly Wormsley, I'm the Head of People, Policy and Partnerships.
Put it on. We're grateful for the full report and for the context of the residents' survey. Can we ask that we receive future reports as a matter of course? Thank you. David.
Yeah, if I could just come in and take you to page 42 and the background to the report methodology. Are we satisfied that we genuinely have got a cross-section of our public responding to this, because it would only appear to have been advertised on the website and on social media, and we do have particularly an elderly population who aren't necessarily digitally included, and I wonder if the responses we've received are a genuine cross-section of the residents of this borough.
It's always difficult to know when you do a survey like this. I mean, the bullet point afterwards does say that the provider of this survey then weighted the responses to make them representative of our residents. So some work around that has been done. But for me, I mean, you've got to balance how would you engage people who aren't digitally engaged? Do you want us to write to everybody with the associated cost? Do you want us to do door knocking with clipboards? Do you want us, at one time you put an advert in the local paper, but the local paper doesn't exist anymore. So I think all these things have to be weighted against getting the best that you think you can get, as opposed to spending an awful lot of money to get, a perfect response. I mean, we are now setting up a new body of residents to a citizens panel. Thank you, a citizens panel, so that we can be a bit more assured in the future that these responses are more reflective of the borough. But I mean, I take your point, but it's really difficult to know how much you would want to spend on getting the perfect response.
Yeah, if I just could come back, because it is a satisfaction survey, and perhaps one of the biggest dissatisfactions is the difficulty in contacting the council if you aren't online or digitally included. And in terms of how do we contact people, there must be a number of elderly persons groups around the borough where you could just distribute some of these surveys, possibly.
Well, I'm sure, our team will be delighted to hear your suggestions.
Thank you. Michael.
Thanks, Chairman. Councillor Thompson, can I take us to Appendix B, please, on page 85? And specifically, if I could take you down to question 4. Now, question 4 was asking residents to what extent that they feel that they can influence decisions made about their local area. And sadly, only 11% agreed that they could influence decisions. So effectively, 9 in 10 residents in South Ribble feel that they have no influence whatsoever over the decisions that we take as a council. Do we have any further context to this, please? This is obviously the lowest figure there. And how can we improve this? And also, do you have any further background information over whether we've got a split over geographical areas or even ward-specific data, etc., or we just got this global figure for South Ribble as a whole?
We have done some work at a ward level, so we'd be happy to provide that if that would be useful. Obviously, this is, as you say, the lowest figure, and the work that we are doing on a citizens panel is intended, one of its measures of success will be how do people genuinely feel that their involvement in a citizens panel has influenced decision making. So it's not the number of people that attend those groups, it's not the number of people that engage, it's the number of our residents who genuinely feel that their engagement has led to them being part of decision making. So again, it has informed our corporate strategy sort of for the next year.
This is mirrored on page 43 with a similar figure, which shows that in the previous survey in 2021, the figure was 16%, and it's now down to 11. Have you any comments on that?
I think, whilst as a councillor, I was disappointed with the results of the survey. I think if you compare them to other boroughs who were doing similar surveys at the similar time, there is a genuine falling off of satisfaction right across the country, right across councils of differing sizes, of different political control. People just feel a bit less, or they certainly did last January, a bit less happy with the way they perceive their local councils to be. But I mean, I'm not in any way trying to say these figures are incorrect, but I think, when people talk about value for money, and we're a council who froze council tax for 3 years out of 5, but people aren't satisfied with that. When you talk about, satisfaction in our parks and green spaces falling, when we've just got a 4th green flag that we'd never had before, when whatever you say about how we've managed this council over the last 6 years, no reasonable person can say we haven't invested in our parks and playgrounds, and yet satisfaction is falling. I would suggest there's something else going on rather than people just commenting on South Ribble Borough Council per se. As I say, I'm not disputing the figures. The figures are what the figures are. But whether it's genuine satisfaction with the things that we are doing, or whether it's just a general dissatisfaction and perception that people have, is something that will have to be explored further.
Can I just pick that up a bit more? One of the points you made was about council tax, and I can understand that when we only keep 10% of the council tax in this borough. So people's actually their council tax that goes up because the county council and the police and fire allocations go up, and our 10%, that the 0% rise in those would not be easily visible to the average council taxpayer. But the fact that this is low may be a general trend. I just wonder whether we actually need to do some thinking in the council as a whole about how it's possible to engage people more. And that also applies in by-elections. For example, our political engagement levels are fairly low when you look at the by-elections. I just wonder whether we could ask the Cabinet to put some thought into how we might engage people more in the processes of the council and what goes on. I know you've got your, you mentioned already, you've got your panel But so you're obviously doing some thinking already.
But I mean, with all due respect, and I hate saying that because it sounds like you're going to say something disrespectful. I'm not. With all due respect, if the Scrutiny Committee wants to do some work on engagement, then the Cabinet would be more than happy to listen to what you've got to say. It is, as I said, it's not an issue just for South Ribble. This there is a national mood going around at the moment of genuine dissatisfaction with not just with councils but with politicians and the decisions that we try and make, and I'm sure all of us here would find that really disheartening when we all work so hard to try and do the right thing.
Thank you. Michael.
Thanks, Chairman. I take on board what Councillor Thomason is saying, and there may well be patterns across the local government families, so to speak, but nevertheless, we've got to focus on what's important to ourselves in South Ribble. And I think the suggestion that Councillor Thomason has made is probably something that we could consider picking up as a committee and maybe establish a task group to look at issues like this. I mean, I'm a parish councillor. I was at a parish council meeting last week, and one of the members of the public, just relevant to this point, actually made the point, well, it's nice to be able to come here and actually speak to the council directly. And you used to have something similar like this at South Ribble, didn't you, in areas? I said, well, we did. There were sort of area committees. Whilst they weren't perfect, but that member of the public felt it was an opportunity for her to engage with the council. And I think we've maybe pulled ourselves in a little bit in the hubs. We've taken things forward in some ways, but in other ways, it's not a great way in terms of making public decision making and listening to the public. But that's just one suggestion. But there's a lot of ways that we can look at this. So I think it's maybe a piece of work that we could take on. Thank you.
Yeah, we'd already noted that.
Yeah, just go slightly back to sort of page 78. Looking at the other side of it, obviously the council satisfaction, what this survey also does is gives you some really, really valuable information about what people are thinking, some of the background, and what their current situation is, which may or may not influence some of the decisions. Some of the things on page 78 I picked out were 39% of respondents overall were considered about their economic well-being. My job, 23% of respondents were concerned about their job. Losing my home, 17% of respondents were concerned about losing their home, and it rises to 38% of respondents living in rented accommodation. And those figures for anybody are really quite worrying. They're just not necessarily. It's not like a council target as such, but they're real problems that this council could face within having to support those people. This is an area I think we can have a really big effect and increase satisfaction by reaching out to these people, saying, "Look, we can help with this." Do you think this is something we should be concentrating on, and how do you think we should tackle it? So I think this is something we can add some real value to. So it tells us a lot about what our residents are feeling.
And I don't think any of us would be that surprised with those figures when you think about the economic uncertainty that the country's been through probably since the pandemic. I don't think any of us would be surprised. I think there has to be some realism, though. We're a local district council with an annual budget of around £16 million. Now, we do have the household support fund. We have a homelessness section of the council that does some terrific work and is now focusing much more on the prevention side. So getting to people before they become homeless. And you'll see later on when we're talking about the revenue budget, whilst we're spending more money on homelessness than we've ever spent before, actually we're not spending as much as we thought we would have to this year. And I would argue that that's as a direct result of some of the terrific work that's being done. So we are doing some really good work in all of those areas, whether it's homelessness, cost of living crisis, the household support fund, holiday hunger schemes, all of those are great things that we're doing, but we have £16 million a year to spend. And that's not increasing much in the future either. So we have to be realistic about what we can do. and recognise our place in a public sector that includes, you know, the behemoths of the NHS and Lancashire County Council. I'm proud of the work that we do around that, but I'm also realistic about the limits that we have.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Just to bring you page 87, the word cloud for local area improvements. Do you believe this is the best way to summarise the results? And then also, many of the issues that require improving are outside of the council's control. What do we do regularly to influence our partners, such as the county council and police?
I think we have a mixed bag of relationships with the NHS, the police, LCC. There's some really good pockets of work being done, and in other places it could be so much better. The issue for our residents is they don't know, and frankly they shouldn't care about who delivers the services to them. What our residents deserve is the best service that they can get. But while we have the system that we have, you're always going to get residents giving answers to surveys about South Ribble, but the answer is probably not about South Ribble. You know, the answer will be about a service being provided by the NHS, the police, or Lancashire County Council. But that's the imperfect world of local government, in which we all do our best to navigate to try and get the best for our residents. But so I think if you're in a unitary area and you're asking these questions about the council, you can be fairly confident that the answer you're getting is about the council. But if you're asking those questions in a 2-tier or even a 3-tier area, such as we have locally, I would argue you can never be quite certain who the resident is talking about when they say the council gives value for money or the council responds well to my concerns. It is a dilemma.
You've mentioned quite a bit in terms of the dissatisfaction as being seen not just in South Ribble but across the board. So I've seen on page 44 there's the table to do with benchmarking, but only 3 of the questions out of the 8 that are on the table on page 43 have been benchmarked against. Is there a reason why the other 5 we haven't got the data of the benchmarking?
Those 3 are questions that just about every council asks. Some of the questions we ask are our own questions and some aren't, but they're the 3 main ones that are more or less in every single. So you are able to benchmark right across the piece on those questions. The LGA has its own survey that it has developed for councils who want to send out just their own survey, but we've tailored some of ours differently. But they're the 3 ones that you can say, do you know what? Every council that's done a resident survey this year will have asked these questions. And so they're the best 3 to say, if we're looking at all councils, what are residents saying to all councils?
I appreciate that they may be the best 3. I was just wondering, is there similar questions from the LGA for the other 5? Because if there are, it would be good to see across the board, not just the ones that we're viewing as the most important, but all of these seem pretty important to me. So if we have got anything to benchmark them against, I do think it's important. And if we can get hold of them, if they do exist, that'd be great.
I'm happy to take a look at how. I don't want to spend hours and hours of officer time reading every single survey question that every single other council's done. But if we can find some questions that are similar to ours, then we'd be happy to report back on them.
Peter Gabbett.
Thank you, Chair, again. Again, it's the next page, page 88, the workload again, just this time for the recovery of the cost of living crisis. Obviously, you've already alluded to the things that the council have done, the freezing of council tax, etc. What more do you think we can do to help our residents at this difficult time?
We can always do more within the constraints of the finances that we have available, at our command. So, social prescribing service, which is relatively new, but is now reaching out to lots of people and pointing them in the right direction to get early help. I think that can be a real driver for change in this area. But I think a lot of the work that we do will have to be in partnership with others, because that's just a realistic acknowledgement of where we sit in the public sector for the people of South Ribble. It is a bit of a irony, really, because if you ask most people out there who their local council is, they won't say Lancashire. And if you ask them who delivers the most services in your area, they won't say the NHS. They'll say South Ribble's their local council. And yet we are, as much as we probably punch above our weight in so many of these things, we're so much smaller than the police, the NHS or LCC. But people recognise us as being their local council. So we can always do more, but we have to be realistic about a lot of the work that we do will be about influencing others.
Thank you. Do we have any? Well, we don't have members who are not on the committee. Oh, one member who's not on the committee who might want to ask any questions. Don't think he's interested. Members of the public, thanks then to you both for your contribution and for the breadth of your understanding of the work of the council, which is clear. Have we any recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. Some of the themes from tonight's discussion. The committee thanks the Cabinet member for attending and answering questions. The committee welcomes the commitment to provide future resident survey reports as a matter of course. The committee asks that the methodology for future surveys consider those who are not digitally enabled or a hard to reach group. The committee welcomes the Cabinet member's suggestion that Scrutiny review how the council may engage with residents and increase democratic participation. And the committee asks that the results be further benchmarked with other councils and the wider local government sector. Thank you, Chair.
Gone. And change of officers again, I think. No, not yet. Okay, I might got the wrong bit then. I've got down Caroline Wolfenden on this, but you're standing in. Thank you. In which case, thank you for that. And we will move on to the item 7 on the agenda, which is about the Q2 performance monitoring report. If anybody's downloaded it and is watching on YouTube, that's on page 89 of the public documents. Would you like to make any introductory remarks, Councillor Tomlinson?
You'll forgive me, I only found out at lunchtime that I was presenting on this. That there is a briefing. I think for me, the interesting thing is, I can't remember seeing one of these before where the main 15 projects are all rated as green. So that's really encouraging. It's the nature of these things that we'll focus on some of the indicators under that are not doing as well as we would like. But of those indicators in the corporate strategy, 67% are at or above. The old chestnut of NEATs is still there, and I'll have more to say on that if anybody asks me any questions, because I think, you measure yourself about things that you can affect and work on and not others. But some of the highlights, the health and wellbeing programme, been really well received. Projects there, whether it's the holiday camps and activities in local parks, free bike servicing, really popular and is always well received. The HAF programme that I referred to under the last item, over 1,200 children access that. So again, really well received. Climate change and biodiversity initiatives, we're doing some good work there. There's a whole range of things, but I'm happy to try and field any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you. I should have said, for the sake of those who are joining on YouTube, that Councillor Alty, who should have been leading this business, is not well, and Councillor Tomlinson is standing in her stead, and he does not have this as part of his cabinet portfolio. So we're grateful for his knowledge, but recognise that he may not be on top of everything because he's only just known about his being put in to stand in the stead of the leader of the council. Thank you. Paragraph 91, paragraph 17. I may turn that to you to that. The Household Support Fund, what steps are we taking to target those in need with regards to this fund? And is there anything more we can do?
Yeah, I think there's always more that we can do. We've obviously just found out about additional household support fund monies that are going to be available. If the committee would like a further update, I can get one from the head of communities and then distribute that. That better?
It's the same paragraph, so page 91, paragraph 17, just on the cost of living roadshow. So how is it that we're measuring the effectiveness of the roadshow as engaging with 53 residents seems quite low?
So I know the roadshow, I certainly went to visit. That number does seem very low because I went to visit it when it was on Tesco car park at Leyland, and they reported they'd had quite a few on that one day. I think when you're trying to reach out to people, because we had the conversation before about hard to reach groups and what are we doing and is it cost effective, it's always a difficult one because you try and reach out to hard to reach people, and guess what? They're hard to reach. So I would say, 53 is better than none. I would have liked to have seen higher figures than that. I agree.
So you've preempted one of my questions, actually. So to do with the cost of this. So if we're only reaching 53 people, are we able to understand how much it's actually costing to service 53 people, just so we can understand, is this the best way to actually impact and create change? So if we're able to get that, I appreciate you can't do that right now. But also as well, what else is it that the council's actually doing to try and reach more people across South Ribble to affect change?
Yeah, and I think I'd be more interested actually in what the results of the 53 contacts were. So, for instance, and I'm plucking figures out of my head just to illustrate a position here. If that project cost us £10,000 to reach 53 people, but 10 of them was then able to access support of £15,000 a year each, then that's money well spent. So I think the raw numbers may not be a good indicator. So perhaps if maybe we could get a bit more background as to what actually happened to those 53 people, that would be useful. Again, reaching out, this is an example of us trying to do that, so that we will try different ways. We will try and reach out, maybe to our parish councils. There's a whole range of things we could be doing, and this is one example of the things that we did that on the face of it, for quite a lot of effort, reached a small number of people. But that doesn't mean to say that those contacts were not quality ones. But I think if we can get that information, I'd be just as interested as I'm sure the committee are.
Thank you. Can I take you to page 94, please, paragraph 26, which is talking about the transformation programme. Could you tell me, please, what the target is for budget savings from the transformation strategy and what progress has been made to date on meeting the target?
You've asked me a question that, as the finance portfolio holder, I really should be able to answer, but I can't. I'm happy to get the committee those figures.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you could, please. Thank you.
Nikki Pete is going to ask the next question. She's online.
Hi, could I take you to page 96, paragraph 33, with regards to the Leyland Town Deal project? And we just want to ask, are we on target with timescales and budgets, please?
But I'll allow Hayden to keep quiet, although it's not a question for a decision, so he might be able to inform. He might be able to inform the committee better than I can. But certainly, at the last, we have a capital projects board that meets every 6 weeks or so to keep track of the town deal, Jubilee, and other major projects that we've got. And certainly at the last one, all the indicators were that it remains on track and is likely to deliver within budget, which I think, is really, really encouraging. It's a long process. Everybody, this £25 million was promised to us, I think, in November 2019. And here we are in November 2024. And whilst we have spent some money knocking things down, we haven't yet started actually building anything. But I think getting the jigsaw pieces together, I think there was something like 93 property owners in the town centre that we had to work with and come to arrangements with. The former Iddens and Heaton site that we did demolish required an enormous amount of remediation. But we now are out to tender for those houses to be built on there. We all know the market has now moved and we're ready to start work on the market hall to refurbish that. So there's a lot going on without people actually being able to see a lot at the moment. But that is likely to change in the immediate future. But the brief answer to the question is yes and yes. We're still on target for what was always a spring, summer of 2026 for this to be completely done. And we're still looking that we're going to come in within budget.
Can I just come in on this one? You mentioned the market. How are we monitoring the effects of the move on market traders and their custom?
Well, yeah, it's very early days, obviously, but I visited the market last Friday and talked to a couple of stallholders who were telling me that trade at the moment is about where it was this time last year, which is really encouraging because they're in a new site, which is probably the best one that we could find, but isn't ideal. I would have loved them to be somewhere on Huff Lane, but the property that big on Huff Lane that's available and that people were prepared to rent to us just doesn't exist. But obviously they've got a loyal customer base. People like the traders on Leyland Market. And as I said, the two I spoke to, and this is just informal and anecdotal, were telling me that trade is about where they were this time last year.
Thank you. Hayden?
Yeah, just referring to page 100, paragraph 44, we talk about number of people in temporary accommodation. Yeah, it's I know we're looking, we're spending more and more, and obviously we do, and then the service we provide is from knowledge it is outstanding. It just says at the end of quarter two there are 135 homelessness presentations. And these are people who were threatened with homelessness in 56 days, and of these, 82 were at relief stage, effectively like roughly nearly 2/3. I mean, there's no prevention work can be undertaken. So it could be a significant cost coming down the track here. And have we got an action plan for trying to reduce the number of households in temporary accommodation to try and preempt this? And whilst we have to use temporary accommodation, what steps do we take to make sure that standard of accommodation is acceptable?
So the questions you're asking, there are specific rules about the quality of temporary accommodation. I don't have those to hand, but I'm sure if the committee wants it, that Jen Mullins' team will be happy to provide you with it. As I said before, we did increase the budget. So at our budget meeting early in the year, we increased the amount of money we would have available to tackle the problems around homelessness, which remains high, far higher than we would like it, far higher than it's ever been before. But the rate of increase does seem to have tapered off. Our team have done some innovative work with our social housing providers to make sure that it's easier for people at threat of homelessness to get through the select move process that allows you to apply for housing. But what we're really focusing on now is prevention. It's working with people at the earliest stage that we can so that they don't become homeless. Because once they present as homeless, we're already in crisis management mode. But some of the specific questions that you've asked, there will be rules and regs around that I'm sure we'll be happy to share.
Thank you. Any subsidiary questions? Does the member who's here, who's not a member of the committee, wish to speak? Mr. Sharples? No. Okay. Questions from members of the public who are not here? There are no members of the public not here who are here. Sorry. So thank you to both of you, particularly for stepping in briefs that are not your own. Your long experience of being a councillor shows in your grasp of a cabinet portfolio which is not your own. It's quite impressive. Thank you. Do we have some recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. Some of the themes from the discussion. The committee thanks the Cabinet Member and Head of Service for attending and answering questions. The committee welcomes further information on how we are encouraging residents to access the Household Support Fund, the effectiveness of the cost of living roadshows and temporary accommodation action plan. The committee looks forward to receiving an update on the budget savings target and progress with the transformation strategy. Thank you, Chair.
Move on to agenda item 8, the capital programme and balance sheet monitoring outturn position as of the 30th of September. And I welcome Louise Mattison, who is here for the last time. I don't know whether that's something to celebrate, but we're or you may be celebrating, but whether the council is celebrating the loss of your knowledge and contribution to the life of the council is something we've been grateful to for a long time. We do note that you have a successor already appointed, and the processes in doing that have left us as a council have been very good, that we don't have an interregnum in this position. So I think that is something to make a note of as a council, that we've actually managed that succession strategy in a good way. But if we can move on, I don't think we give you a round of applause at this stage. If we can move on page 108, paragraph 10 in the capital programmes, we mention this every time, but the reprofiling of the capital programme from nearly 48 million to 30 million now is fairly significant. It's fairly drastic in some ways. We're halfway through the financial year. Could you talk us through the reasons and what can be done to be more realistic in future projections?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to what I said at Q1, really, when I talked about us being a bit more robust and realistic, certainly on big capital projects, because a lot of this slippage will be around the town deal and the project that's going on next door. These are big projects, over 30 million on the town deal, 20 million next door. These projects will be delivered and the money will be spent. It just, if it slips from we were expected to spend it in March next year to us spending it 6 weeks later, then it slips across the whole. It looks like there's a huge amount of money that's being spent late, and it could be literally a matter of a few weeks where you've just gone from one financial year to the other. But it's a valid comment. I think it was made at the end of the last quarter, and I said I agreed. It was ever thus, I think. It was ever thus. But I think at risk of repeating what I said at the end of Q1, some of that is on us as members. We're really keen to show, look at what we're doing. Here's a £2 million project, and we get it in the budget. And actually, if we were challenged about how quickly we could spend that £2 million, by the time you've got planning applications, done a public consultation, applied for the grant, gone out to procurement, suddenly, half a year's gone and you're nowhere near even starting. So I think it's a valid comment, and I do feel like I'm repeating what I said at the end of the last quarter.
Effectively, what you're saying is some of this could well be an artifact just of the fact that we have financial years that finish at a particular time.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, the big projects, and most of this is in the town deal. Most of it is in the town deal. But I would think, having taken the criticism and acknowledged it's a justified one, we should celebrate the fact that we're a council that's got massive capital projects going on board, and many district councils don't have these.
Thank you. Councillor Howarth.
Yeah, if I could take you to page 113, paragraph 34, bad debt provision. What's the usual figure allowed for the provision of bad debt? What trend information do we have? And is this likely to increase in future years?
Thank you. So we have a standard process, and I haven't got the precise figures to hand. But what we do is we take at each quarter, we look at all of the outstanding debts and the age of those debts, and we provide 100% for all debts over a certain age, then 80%, 50%, and so on. So we do have quite a prudent approach to our bad debt provision, and then obviously we review it for anything that we know is going to turn bad. If somebody's gone into administration, etc., we would be picking that up at that point in time. So it does fluctuate, and then obviously we can make a provision if they haven't paid. Say I can get you the precise percentages and age of debt, but if the process is 100% for anything over 6 months, and then subsequently those debtors do pay, then obviously we release that from the provision and that is credited back to the account. But we do it on that approach just to err on the side of caution. And that is a cumulative position, so it's continuously added to or decreased dependent on the level of debt at each quarter end.
Thank you. And that takes us to the end of the questions on this particular item. And I think, am I right? Yes. So we have questions from members of the committee, of whom there are not members not on the committee, questions from members of the public, none here. So we must thank you both for your contributions, and we have recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. Just some of the themes from the discussion. The committee thanks the Cabinet Member and Director for attending and answering questions. The committee places on record its appreciation to Louise Mattinson for her service to the Council and wishes her well for her retirement. The committee commends the Council succession planning on recruiting a new Director of Finance to ensure a smooth transition. And finally, the committee welcomes further information on the provision of aged debts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We move on, and we have the same team ahead of us. So a lot of work going in today for particular Councillor Tomlinson.
The committee agree the recommendation.
I'm sorry, we must agree the recommendations. Would you all show your hands? Thank you. Just to move on and say on the next item of business, we have the same team and we welcome you back. Would you like to make any introductory remarks, Councillor Tomlinson?
I think the revenue budget at the end of quarter two shows a relatively healthy position overall for the council. The caveat I would put to that is, whilst there are fluctuations across the directorates, the projected net outturn of an underspend of over £500,000 could be explained as being just treasury management. All the other fluctuations across the directorates tend to balance themselves out. But the fact that we've got so much money in the bank, for want of a better phrase, invested, and the interest rates are staying stubbornly high, certainly higher than we were projecting, means we've got much more money coming into the council in interest payments, which is a nice place to be in if you happen to be cash rich, as we are. So high interest rates whilst not good for anybody with a mortgage or with debts, certainly for this council, with the money that we've got invested, is bringing in significantly more money than we budgeted for. But the report does, the text in the report does give some context to the variations across the directorates, and we're happy to try and answer any questions that the committee may have on those.
Thank you. On the questions that we want to ask, the recent increase in employer national insurance contributions, does that have an effect on the council?
In theory, it does, yeah. And I'm sure, like any good Section 151 officer, Louise has got the exact figure to hand. But there are some assurances going around that councils will get assistance to mitigate that. The whole reason that the government introduced these increases to employer national insurance is to invest in public services. And I know there are soundings coming out that mitigations will be given to councils to ameliorate that increase. But the exact figure is £360,000 a year. £360,000 a year.
Yeah, can I just take you to page 126, the third bullet point where it talks about rent reviews in our investment portfolio. I know these have been sort of accelerated. We've got on top of these, a lot of these now, and additional staffing resources have been provided. Yet we've still got 112k overspend. That figure we're still on a significant overspend here. I know it says going to be, we might improve the current financial position, but how close to actually breaking even on that are we going to get? And seeing as that all the investment properties are virtually full, that still seems to be a significant overspend.
Well, as it says, this is that we do have a few vacant properties that are not bringing rent in, and we do have staff, as you rightly say, working on rent reviews. The new management system that we put in to help us with our asset management is bringing these forward at a rate. I have to say, until that system was put in, there were some properties that not had a rent review for a considerable amount of time, and the vast majority of our renewals are coming in and bringing in more money than they did. So the ambition is that we will get to budget. Whether we will or not, only time will tell. But what I can confidently say is by the end of this year, we will have as good a grip on what is happening with our assets as we've had probably as long as I've been a councillor. And some of that is new technologies, and some of that is just some hard work done by our officers to go through, the 90 odd properties that we've got and make sure that everything is up to date. I've said it, I don't know if I said it to this committee, but I've said it before. My ambition as the asset portfolio holder is I should be able to walk into this building and ask someone in our assets team to tell me about a property that we own, and they should be able to press a few buttons on the screen and tell me everything about that property, from who's renting it, how much they're paying, when the last Legionnaires test was done, when the last fire risk assessment was done, who's responsible for paying the utilities. All those things we do know, and we've always known, but they've been in different parts of the council, so that we haven't had the ability in the past to tell us, at a snapshot, what's been happening at a property that we own on Centurion Business Park. But we will be able to do by the end of this year, and I think that's a massive step forward.
Just to follow on for that, so talking about assets and asset and income generation, I think bullet point 5, I think it is, around income for conference facilities. How much has been received so far? And we've got a 19k reduction in income. That's largely been predicated on the new council chamber facility being completed. Obviously, that's going to be probably completed towards the end of this financial year, I would have thought now. So, obviously, are we looking at any ways of marketing our facilities better and closing that gap?
And again, I think this comes back to the point we made before about capital investments and being realistic. I think that some of that projection thought that the new council chamber would be open, and it's clearly not going to be. It's not going to be. But undoubtedly, when the new council chamber is open and we're not having to set this room up like this, because we couldn't market this room for today because it had to be set up like this with the mics, and we couldn't market it for tomorrow either because it's going to take tomorrow to take it all down again. So that once we get a new bespoke standalone council chamber, we will be able to market this every day of the year effectively. But I think, there's no doubt that underspend is there, and I'm not confident that we'll close that underspend by the end of the year.
Michael, Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Thomason, can I take you to the bottom of page 127, paragraph 19, bullet point 10, which is referring to a £37,000 overspend due to a shortfall in trade waste income compared to budget. Does the trade waste service actually make money for the council, and what are the trends?
So, as a standalone service, it does make a small amount of money for the council. If you start putting in all the accountancy costs for all council overheads, then it doesn't make money. Trade waste is a non-statutory service. There are lots of private companies that do this. And so in effect, we could just walk away from it. We could just say, well, we're not, why would we do it if Biffa or one of the other private companies can do it? But we have traditionally operated this service, and a lot of charities and schools use our services for trade waste. There's a big piece of work being done at how we can improve that figure, because some people are not paying a commercial rate to us, and that's for historical reasons. So I think we are going to have to come to a decision on whether we run this as a purely commercial service that makes money, because I think the opportunity to make money is there, but that would mean us running it on a purely commercial basis. Whereas in the past, I think because we're a council and we're nice, cuddly people, for certain people, it's not been run on a commercial basis. And there will be a decision that has to be taken around that in the future.
Councillor Howard.
I can take you to page 128, paragraph 21, bullet point 3. It's Worden Hall. So, how are room bookings for Worden Hall going? When will Worden Hall start to break even or even make a surplus for the council?
So, I think we spoke about this last time, and I said I wasn't, if you remember, I said I wasn't convinced that we had the in-house skills. As much as we tried to keep it in-house, I'd become less and less convinced that we got those skills to run this in the way that we want. We've now got an outside company who are going to run the bar for us. And there is a report going to Cabinet on Wednesday that will appoint a company to run the catering for us. The issue we've had around Worden Hall is, what is the actual offer? What is the being clear about what the offer is, where people, and it's a big day for people, certainly for a wedding. We are now in a position where we will be able to say, this is what we can offer at Worden Hall. Should the company who is recommended to Cabinet get the catering contract, I've done some soft market testing, talking to people who I know who work in the trade. They've got a fantastic reputation for providing a wide range of high quality food offers. And I'm now confident that we will be able to start saying to people, if you come to Word and Hall, this is the offer. And frankly, try as we might, we've not been in a position to do that. And so I think that the position will become more regularised. We'll be more confident. If I'm blunt, I think some of our staff have not been confident about always letting this out and promoting it as well as we could, because the offer just hasn't been there. And it's something that we recognised, at least 3 months ago, because I said so at the last corporate performance committee. But we're now in a position where to me, it feels like there's a more robust offer that we can confidently say to people, you can book your wedding here, and here's the people that will make sure you get the bar offer that you want. Here are the people who can provide any sort of food you want, and we can not relax, that's the wrong word, but be confident in that event will be a success. And that means we can promote this so much harder, because if I'm honest, we've not been promoting as well as we could because we haven't been confident of the offer that we could give to people.
Can I just follow that up and ask, we did quite a lot of work on Word and Hall. Did we not know what the offer we were aiming for was when we did the work?
I think if we're honest, some people in this building didn't realise just what was needed to do that. Just what was needed. To provide a wedding for someone is an incredibly complex operation. And I think some people in this building underestimated what it needed. And that led us to being unclear as to what the offer was. And I think we're now getting to a place where we are clear.
Thank you. Nikki.
Hello. Can I take you to page 128, paragraph 21 again, but bullet point 4 this time? So I just wondered, when is the South Ribble Museum and Exhibition Centre going to reopen? Do we know yet? And what's been the delay in undertaking the renovations? Thank you.
Okay, so a lot changed in this building with COVID and the retirement of David Hunt, who people will remember, a long-serving member of staff here who ran that as a museum and exhibition centre. When we were able to get back in the building as life opened up again, we found quite a lot of issues. Many of the exhibits had got pest infestation, had got mould, and had to be sent to the Lancashire Archive, where they freeze dry them. I didn't realise they freeze dry the paper to kill any infestations. But more than that, the building itself had got several issues with damp. It is listed, and that brings all sorts of challenges. We have a plan to reinvest in the building to get it back up to standard. Whether it will ever open again as a museum, I'm not sure. Looking at the visitor numbers before COVID, they were tiny. It provided a great service for the volunteers. The volunteers who went there valued it so much, and in terms of, reducing socialisation, giving people something to do that made them feel useful and engaged. In that respect, I think it did a really good job. As a museum that attracted visitors, I'm far from convinced, and so we're having a real rethink about what we could possibly do with that building in the future. It's a difficult one because it's not suitable for housing. It's not suitable for commercial. The parking is non-existent. It's listed. It's got wobbly steps up to one level and even worse steps down to another. So I think we're going to have to put our thinking caps on. But it is a Grade 2 listed building that was the first, the oldest school in South Ribble, and it's ours. So we'll have to put some real thoughtful consideration as to what we do with it in the future.
Thank you for that. Michael. Councillor Green.
It's fine, Chairman. I've been called worse.
Probably thinking.
Councillor Thompson, thanks for that answer. If I can just pick up on that, if a decision was taken at some point in the future not to reopen it as a museum, what would we do with the exhibits to ensure that those are not lost for future generations in South Ribble?
And that's part of the dilemma. That's part of the dilemma, that we do hold these archives that are of a varying quality. Some of them are relatively recent social history type things, but some of them are more important. Obviously, the archive at Lancashire are well versed in how to look after these things, and at the moment that's what they're doing. I called into the Leyland Historical Society's pop-up shop in Leyland and was able to speak to the chairman, and again his view was a bit more measured than I thought. I expect him to be a passionate supporter of every single piece of paper. His view was a bit more measured, but it will have to be part of the consideration as to the future of that building. We will have to house at least some of that stuff somewhere else, and that's something we'll have to think about. Can I just announce actually that thanks to the generosity of South Ribble Borough Council, Leyland Historical's pop-up shop will now be open until Christmas. So if you've not had the chance to visit yet, please do take the chance to go in and say hello. They'd be delighted to see you. And they're interesting. They're getting more visitors a day than South Ribble Museum used to get in a month. I suppose venue, location is everything.
Thank you. There's no questions from members who are not members of the committee or from the public. So thank you to both of you for, again, showing the breadth of your knowledge of the workings of the council. And I hope you're very happy that we're finishing your bit at 22 minutes past 7. Any recommendations from there?
Thank you, Chair. The committee thanks the Cabinet Member and Director for attending and answering questions. The committee welcomes the update on the commercialisation of Worden Hall and work to aim for it to break even or make a surplus. Thank you, Chair.
Are you, Michael? You?
Thanks, Chairman. Happy to accept those as recommendations. I do think a recommendation should be included with regard to South Ribble Museum and Exhibition Centre, that we keep an ongoing look into the future use of that building, and also if it's not to house those exhibits, what the future location will be for those exhibits, so that is not lost as an historic record for future generations.
Thank you. Are you content, members of the committee, that we take that and formulate it and circulate it, and that the other recommendations are accepted? Thank you. Can you show of hands? Thank you very much. And thank you to Louise. I wish you well in retirement. Sorry? Not finished yet. No. And to Councillor Tomlinson, thank you for picking up the portfolio that wasn't your own. We move on to Councillor Sharples and the portfolio update on customer services and digital. You'll be pleased to know we're starting earlier than it was on my agenda, so we can give you a little more time. Alongside Councillor Colin Sharples, we have Asim Khan, and I cannot from this distance read the title of your directorate. And we have Claire Beattie and Alison Wilding along the other side of the councillor who has the portfolio. Would you like to say anything in the way of introductory comments, Councillor Sharples?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Chair. I have to say I spent 4 years on that side under the excellent tutelage of Councillors Howarth and Green. And the great thing when you sit on that side is you know what the questions are. So I'm a little bit nervous sitting on this side and a bit uncertain, but I'll do my best. You've everybody seen the report, I'm assuming. I've got to say thanks to Alison and Claire and Asim for the report. Excellent report. I think it's an excellent report. I think it's a very positive report. And as a executive member, I don't really have any areas of concern. You might have, but I don't have any at the minute. I think we're delivering an excellent service in difficult times. And the reason I say that is because I think we're on a journey. We're on a journey from around about 2020, 21, when shared services kicked in. And we have to go back then and think about where we've come so far on that journey. And I think we've come a hell of a long way. So sometimes you look at the performance indications, you think, well, that's a bit less than it was last year, or that's not quite right. But really, I'm happy because we've moved a long way on that journey when you think where we were in 2019, 2020. Apart from that, I'm happy to answer questions or pass them on to those that can. Thank you.
We have in the report a vision for the team's agenda. What's your personal vision as a cabinet member for the portfolio?
I think my personal vision is that we provide the highest possible level of service, customer focused. I think it's important to be customer focused and to be accessible when we're needed. I think it's about how we connect with customers and how they connect with us. That's the key to the whole thing. And I think there's a transformation process going on all the time because especially the IT part of it is very, very fluid. Things are changing all the time. Better systems come in, better ways of doing things, being more efficient, being more effective. So it never seems to stand still. Sometimes you don't feel you've achieved a point because you're going to move it on. And it is all about connecting with customers. I think we have to review that constantly. And I think we need to be much more digital than we are in some cases. It's about customers being autonomous, if you like, having the ability to connect themselves, knowing without having to make phone calls, without doing it the old way, being able to connect, whether it's on the website, internet, online forums, web chat, social media, new technology, while at the same time, we do have to allow for those that won't be using digital. So that's my vision. It's an ongoing journey, and I think we just have to keep right on top of it, keep reviewing it, and keep making sure that we provide the best service we can.
Can I take you back? You were here, I think, when we were discussing the low figures in terms of citizens of the borough ability to influence things, and that went down from 16 to 11%. The feeling that they could. Does that have a impinge upon how you see your own role?
Yes, it does. I think it's tricky. I think it's a real challenge. Some people don't want to connect at all. Other people can't connect. Finding ways, to get the message out there, get people involved, doing it for themselves. It's really quite difficult. Yeah, it's same with some of the satisfaction data you look at. It's really difficult, but it's one of those things we've just got to keep working on trying to address.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's a really exciting, wide-ranging portfolio going from customer service across a number of different channels, and also the IT basis. Lots of stuff change and things that happens quite a lot. What are the key issues in your portfolio that you see? What are the key issues that you focus on?
The key issues. I think they're in the report anyway, aren't they? I think Sure, do you want to answer that for me? What do you think our key issues we've got? Find it. Money.
Good evening. In respect of ICT in particular, I think there are three main challenges. The first is the keeping up with the pace of the changes in technology and making sure that is well funded. The second one is in relation to retaining staff and skills, because this is a kind of a sector that is evolving and changing all the time. And the third challenge will be in relation to making sure that our systems and network is safe in relation to cybersecurity. So those are the three main challenges in relation to digital services. In relation to customer service in particular, as the executive member has already alluded to, the key one is to make sure that our channels remain engaging with our residents and customers, and to make sure that we continue to provide excellent services.
Is that okay? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Councillor King.
What would you say are some of the key achievements from your portfolio?
Yeah, well, in the alignment of the two separate infrastructures, you've got the alignment with Chorley. Shared service staff can connect to the network regardless of location. The digital strategy, I think that's we've done really well on that, provided a set of guidelines and principles ensuring both technology and the combined team aligned with the overall objectives. The consolidation of revenues and benefits, the software we've used for that, Capital One, both council can now deliver this service using the same cloud-based system, which makes a reduction in costs associated with hosting software. And the rollout of new equipment, laptops and iPads are now in use across the organisation and can be docked into monitors, etc. That's about it.
Supplementary to that.
Okay, and then carry on.
Yeah. Thanks, Chairman. And Councillor Sharples, welcome to being on the other side of the table. Good to see you. Can I just ask you, with regard to what you've just talked about as achievements, have we taken our staff with us on that journey?
I believe we have. I think everybody's on board. They know what's expected of them. They work very hard. They know what the vision is, and I think everybody's on board. I don't know if you disagree with that, would you? Asim, no?
I'd concur entirely with that, Councillor Sharples. One of the key objectives of shared services at the start was to ensure that not only did we implement the changes and the new technology, but also to have development plans for our staff. We undertook a significant recruitment campaign. We appointed an apprenticeship programme, and we continue to maintain that development programme for our staff on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. Moving to another subject, so artificial intelligence. I've got a couple of questions about that, if I may. So, first of all, what do you see as being the key benefits potentially for South Ribble Borough Council of AI, artificial intelligence? And how do we plan to maximise those benefits?
AI, do you mean robots? The key advantages, I think, are it simplifies the way we can do some of the way we can collect data. This is just my view of it, and I'll let Asim come in a minute. For example, if you were going to look at the amount of rubbish that's stored down alleyways and things like that, you could take a picture. The picture identifies what rubbish is in there. That comes back. That kind of intelligence then goes into the system, and that tells you what kind of vehicle you need to send down there, what people involved and things like that. So there are that sort of advantage, Asim.
Yeah. So as I'm sure members appreciate, AI is relatively new technology, although it's moving at some pace, and there are still some concerns about its usage in certain sectors, but certainly in relation to AI in its kind of simplest form, the biggest benefit to South Ribble Council is in relation to chatbots, virtual assists, speech analytics, predictive analytics, and importantly, analysing data. So this is very much in relation to customer services. Some of those technologies aren't particularly favourable with residents and customers, particularly chatbots. They rather speak to individuals and get through. but there is significant advantage in using it in relation to data analytics. So this is where we are, through speech, cross-referencing a variety of different data warehouses to understand demands in service, and cross-reference that against different profile and demographics across the authority. And the culmination of that analysis delivers more effective services and more targeted services where it's needed.
I continue. Yes. Yeah, thanks for that. Speaking personally, I'm not the biggest fan of chatbots, I have to say, when I use them with different companies. But let's hope we can make a success of those, and technology will allow us to develop that, presumably moving forward. And a similar question, but a reverse question. So what do we see for South Ribble Borough Council as being the biggest threats that artificial intelligence will bring?
Well, the key thing would be in relation to the use where we have inadvertently released sensitive information. Part of chatbots and AI intelligence is about machine learning and the system essentially learning from a variety of different subsets throughout local government and using that information. So the key thing for me will be the infringement of security and personal data that's been released as a result of that use of that technology. Cybersecurity generally is a concern for most organisations, but that is an additional area of concern. And clearly it's something that we would have to understand, evaluate and see the benefits of before it's fundamentally rolled out across the council.
And connected to my earlier question as well, one of the perceived dangers of AI as an employee is that it may ultimately lead to less jobs at some point in the future. So how do we reassure our staff that that might not be the case, that it might just be different jobs, and how do we train them into using their skills in different ways to work with that technology so that we can ultimately deliver better services for the residents of the borough?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. Generally, across the industrial world, where automation and robotics has contributed significantly to automation and to manufacturing industries. And automation in relation to council services is not dissimilar. But one of the biggest advantages of AI and automation is actually enabling decisions to be made a lot quicker in the interests of our residents. So traditional access channels, traditional ways of assessing, for example, housing benefit claims could take an enormous amount of time, both in terms of receiving that information, responding to that through traditional methods. And what AI does and automation is significantly increase the turnaround times to benefit our residents and customers. That it was particularly pertinent in the current kind of era where we have people who are financially challenged, the cost of living crisis, and making decisions in relation to housing benefits and financial support is critical. So there are significant benefits in relation to this, but I accept the point that automation also improves significant efficiencies. And the key point for South Ribble Council, or the key kind of opportunity, is to, whilst we wish people to be self-sufficient and digitally independent to be able to access those services, we do continue to have responsibility for those people who are unable to access those systems. It's a finite resource, and the key here is to translate that and free that resource up to target it where it's needed the most. And the most is in relation to those people who would find it difficult to get online and difficult to access those services. We do have a social responsibility, and that's where the biggest investment in our resources would go in relation to that. Having said that, we do have opportunities elsewhere in the council where continuously we have opportunities in different areas where demand increases. Whether that's planning services, whether that's within street scene, and staff who are in those situations can apply for those opportunities, and we continue to support that.
Thank you, Councillor Howarth. I think we've edged onto your next question.
Yeah, I think you've just alluded to it. Actually, I was in Kingsfold Library earlier this afternoon where there was a whole bank of computers being used, which tends to suggest that in areas of deprivation, there isn't access to that sort of facility in the home. So the question is, whilst we move customers to accessing the council digitally, how are we delivering services for those who are digitally excluded?
I'm assuming it won't be much different to the way we're dealing with them now. I don't think we're going to change any way that their access that they have now if they're not digital. It's just trying to encourage people to be more and more digital. We are looking at some ideas to try and encourage them to become digital and to contact them to help them with digital stuff, and hopefully that'll help. But some people are never going to be digital, are they? They're just not going to bother, or they just can't. So we've just got to continue to work with them the way we do now and try and improve that service as best we can.
Just to follow on from that, if I may, part of the problem I see with that is that where we were dealing with people without digital interface, everybody was being dealt with at that level. The more as a percentage of the population we deal with digitally, the more the cost is and the structures need to be for each individual who is not digitally engaged, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so how do we maintain a service for those who are not digitally involved when so much of the council is actually focused around digital availability?
A very good question. Quite difficult to answer, I imagine, but Asim's going to try on it.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the previous point made about freeing up resources. So clearly the strategy is to have services developed that are digitally first accessible. But that doesn't mean to say that those systems can't be used by staff to provide what we call assisted services. So I accept that most of our services in relation to accessing customer services are designed around technology, but it's that same technology that staff then use to deliver people who are unable to connect, whether that's within Gateway and in future it may be outside that particular service and remotely within other community outlets that we have. I'm not sure what the previous question was about, whether it was about inability for people who haven't got the skills, or actually, as you quite rightly put it, the technical interface. Obviously, part of the development of the Gateway service here would mean that in future we would have significantly more self-service points, and it's one of those areas where we will continue to work with other partners to enable access points throughout the borough. I was looking at statistics earlier in relation to some of your other panel members. The uptake in 2020 in relation to digital capability was over 95% within the borough of South Ribble in relation to ONS data from 2020. So it is quite a high take-up, but that doesn't mean to say that there are people who may find that difficult to access anyway, and therefore we provide those services in a different way.
Thank you. Council.
Yeah, it's sort of a bit of a follow-on from that. In the fact, I sort of work my own personal experiences. I work in the customer service industry in contact centre processing resource and all that type of thing. As some people are aware, and obviously. There's the other side of the coin that says if a lot more people are enhancing digitally, what you're actually doing is freeing up the resource for people to contact you who aren't digitally excluded. You're actually freeing up the resource to actually handle that, and also accessibility is also a part. Not exactly about accessible, about are you accessible by phone? It's obviously when it's been open when the council, it's been able to contact the council at your convenience, rather than having to hang on to the phone. Well, is there an alternative method? Well, I can just sit here on a web chat while I get on with something else. So that's that type of thing. But along with having those different contact channels and all the different things, what comes along with that is providing the service. Now, a lot of what we're getting within the reporting is around how many contacts we've handled and abandon rates and things like that. And I think we asked last time about how many emails do we get and what's the service level for emails. And, do we actually forecast for the amount of emails that we get? Do we actually forecast the amount of web chats that we get? What is the service level that we're offering? How many chats can an agent potentially handle at one time? So I'm just wondering whether that suite of, obviously I want to learn more about customer services and digital, but does that suite of information exist and those same service level targets apply across the board no matter what contact channel we use?
We do have the data in relation to emails. On average, we get about 1,300 emails a month. The team have just recently started to handle direct social media messages about services, but we're only seeing about less than 10 of those each month that the team are handling.
Can I just add, email is a kind of a very popular way for customers and residents to contact the council for services, but it's a very unstructured data format. And generally what that means is we have to keep going back and forth to try and get the right information to be able to provide a service. So what I would encourage all our residents and customers to do, including members, is to use our online services, which specifically has a form in respect of the service that you're requesting, because it asks the right questions, which means that if we get the right information, we can provide that service a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently. So I'm not saying that we don't have email contact, but we are promoting and driving as part of the new website online contact because it generates more efficiencies.
Thank you. I have noted the new website, which is one of the achievements that we've had recently. But I just want to pick up something you've said about the specific questions which can help us to identify, but you're actually channeling people by those in ways which might exclude information as well as include it. Would that be fair?
Could you give us an example?
Well, no, because I've not looked at your particular things to know what it is. But if you're saying these are the questions that help us, are they the questions that help the citizen?
I hope so, because some of those forms give you the opportunity to ask add additional information that you may feel pertinent or relevant to that service request. So the initial questions are generally guided or requesting things that are necessary to provide, whether it's a statutory or voluntary service, and helps officers in the council to be able to be more responsive to individual needs. But then there's always an opportunity where people want to add additional information that can be supplied as part of that experience.
Thank you. And back to Councillor Sharples, in a couple of years, you'll be back here. I think it takes about that long to get through all the portfolios, though we might decide to bring that forward if we found something in particular. But what do you expect to see in your portfolio in a couple of years' time?
Everybody's digital. We've got 100% contact rate. Everybody's on e-billing. It's the problem is it's so fluid. Things change all the time. You can set as many targets as you like, but you'll find when we review it in 5 years' time, we'll be changing them again. But the vision remains the same, and that is to be able to offer an excellent service to all customers when it's needed, and that's what we'll always work towards.
CCTV.
Yeah, I'm going to move to a more specific question now, rather than sort of general around the whole portfolio. You probably seen one of the things in the reports back is our recommendations tracker, where we sort of different with different recommendations and different questions that have come across different meetings and for different actions and things like that. And one of them was around request the outcome of the review of the CCTVs provided to committee members. So I think we're talking about CCTV in a while since. And one of the progress comments says all CCTV provision plotted, 10 cameras still to be integrated into digital hub at Strawberry Fields before the regeneration of the police station. Gathering quotes from service provider, network engineers to complete. Does this therefore mean that 10 CCTV cameras are going to be dotted around South Ribble somewhere? If so, where? And when will they start being monitored?
I know this is Asim's favourite subject, so
Yeah, the CCTV estate at South Ribble currently is outdated. The technology needs to be reviewed. We do have a separate project which is underlooking within kind of part of a two-phase approach, and it's starting from the back-end infrastructure because that project was already advanced. So part of that infrastructure is already in place in terms of monitoring and recording. What we need to do now is to ensure that on the ground, the CCTV estate, which is circa around 23, 24 cameras, are reviewed to see whether they are in the right place working with our partners. So that includes, for example, police and other departments within the council. And as part of that refresh proposal, we'll make some recommendations to Cabinet about the future of the CCTV estate within the borough. It could be that some of those cameras continue to be located in the current location, or it may be that as a result of those consultations and work with partners, that there are alternative areas of priorities, either to enhance the current estate or to kind of replace the current CCTV network. What I would say, though, is that CCTV, from experiences elsewhere that I have, it comes at a significant cost. Maintaining that infrastructure and those cameras and those columns is a huge cost to the local authority. Clearly, it provides public reassurance and confidence. But in relation to actually solving crime, those statistics are relatively low. Whether it actually meets a threshold of kind of deterring crime, it maybe adds some value. But the ongoing commitment financially is a significant one, where every 3 to 5 years the technology is reviewed and needs to be kind of modernised. There are ongoing challenges with that. But we do have the capability, as it stands, to monitor and record CCTV footage. It's just a second phase of that we need to bring some recommendations to Cabinet for approval and consideration.
Yeah, I appreciate that you've got the back end of it. This is the front side, the front public viewing side of it. We're working with partners and everybody else. Have we got sort of a time scale as to when that report may come before Cabinet? Any recommendation? Are we talking near future, medium term, longer term? Because one of the key things of the resident survey was people's security and their well-being, and if we can actually show that we are actively looking at this and we are actively considering it. Yes, there is a cost to it, and there's a cost versus reward argument that needs to be had. I think it would give a lot of public reassurance to know that we are, as a council, are actively doing something to enhance their security and well-being.
Yeah, so the initial draft report will be shared with members Q4, so that's January to March, but that's only in terms of the recommendations and the agreement to invest and agree the locations for the CCTV. Clearly, when that agreement is reached, there's the implementation timeline, and that is very much dependent on suppliers and the installation of kit. The reason why I say that is because if we decide that a new requirement is identified, there is a connectivity, which is usually the utility companies who would have to provide that. There is installation of the column and the sub base, and then there's a procurement of the technology. As I say, the back-end infrastructure is already in place, but even those elements I've just described do take time to put in place, and you're probably looking between 6 to 12 months to get that fully operational.
It's just really reassuring to know that that's actually physically happening, because that is new news and that we weren't aware of. So thank you very much for bringing that forward.
Thank you very much for the contributions. Sorry, David. Councillor Howard.
Yeah, sorry, just coming with the last, I hope it's the last question. You alluded to e-billing there, and I wonder just how much success we're having with that. I've got a South Ribble account for paying things like garden waste or whatever. I've got a South Ribble account for going on the planning portal, but I don't recall ever being invited to go paperless as a member of the public. I've had an email as a member of the council. So how good or bad are we at data collection and actually having the ability to email people to invite them to stop getting paper?
Yeah, e-billing's a challenge. It's a real challenge getting people onto e-billing. I think it's about 10, 12, is it 20% now? So 20%.
Businesses now. Apologies. Sorry. Just over 26% for residents and over 80% for businesses now across the borough. So we have made significant progress this year. We've done some targeted campaigns for residents and businesses where we held an email address, and we'll also be taking an opportunity for those that we don't have email addresses for when we send out the annual bills for council tax and business rates in the new year to promote e-billing.
Well, it's a very pertinent question. We do retain resident information, personal information in relation to how people contact us. Clearly, due to GDPR, we need approval in some cases to be able to use that information for other purposes. Fortunately, in this particular case, we do have significant email contact addresses for residents. And the initial phase, there's a hierarchy in how we promote e-billing. And the initial phase was to contact existing people where we had those contact details and to get their agreement. So by default, people have moved across. And that's the reason why in some areas you see a significant uptake in that. But there is a kind of a plan to work through all the different aspects of marketing and promoting contact, where I would urge all members and all residents who may be tuned in to sign up for e-billing, because for every bill that is sent out or every document that goes out by email, that saves the council 65 pence. So it's big numbers if you talk about tens and thousands of people signing up, and it's one of those easy ones. Clearly, there are some areas where, because of statutory requirements, we have to issue information via paper, and that goes through our virtual mailroom service. But wherever possible, if there is no statutory requirement, for example, the electoral canvass, we send information out by email as a default, and that's contained in our print strategy and contact strategy with customers.
Thank you. I think this time together has given us a good overview as a scrutiny committee of this particular area of the work, and I'm grateful to you. I have a question about how you might see our work as helping and supporting you, but I don't think we need an answer to the question. I think that's an ongoing relationship, that we are a critical friend, as it were, and therefore, if there are ways in which our communication can help you do how the portfolio works better, then we're very happy to be involved in that. Thank you for all four of you for being here. We're grateful for your time. There are still on my agenda questions for members not on committee, none of them here, questions for members of the public, and the thank you, which I've already given to you, and then any recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. Some potential recommendations. The committee thanks the Cabinet Member and officers for attending and answering questions. The committee welcomes the commitment to support those digitally excluded in accessing our services. The committee commends the work on the Council's new website. The committee asks for further information on the review of CCTV and future strategy. The committee encourages councillors and residents to sign up to e-billing to save resources and to be more environmentally friendly. Thank you, Chair.
Are you all happy with those recommendations? Thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance. We would release you from this if you wish to go. You can stay for the next couple of items on the agenda if you wish to. Committee matters. Members and training attended, meetings and training attended. Is there anything to report? Well, I need to report that I'm going to be going to some training in the near future for a weekend, but anything else to report? No. Cabinet forward plan, that is available on the site. Does anybody have any questions about that? No. And the committee forward plan, which is
Chair, can I just mention Councillor Tomlinson's suggestion around the committee forming a task group to review resident engagement and democratic participation, and just to get a steer on how the committee would like to pursue that. If it is by task group, perhaps you could let us have volunteers by email outside the meeting, and we can set up a task group and scope that review for you. Thank you, Chair.
I personally think that would be a good thing. Do other members of the committee feel that?
Happy to support that, Chairman.
Yeah. If we set up a task group, bearing in mind that there's only 7 of us, are we allowed to co-opt other members from who are not on this group to be involved in that if there is particular skills or interests?
Yes, Chair, as long as they aren't cabinet members, that will be fine.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. So there is a proposal that we set up a task group. Are you happy with that? Formal decision, yes. Yeah. Thank you. Is there anything else we need to put on the agenda?
Chair, thank you.
That's all for this evening. Thank you for your time. We finish in 2 hours.